Homeless poor boy sleeps in a park every day, a cold millionaire. Women learns why he bursts into tears. He was just a poor boy with torn sneakers and a backpack that looked older than him. He slept on the same park bench every night, hidden under a tattered blanket, clutching a crumpled photo. Most people walked past him like he was invisible. But one cold morning, everything changed. A wealthy woman, famous, powerful, untouchable, stopped in front of him. What she discovered? It shattered her. This is the story of a homeless boy, a cold millionaire, and a secret that would leave the world in tears. His name was Noah, only 15 years old, but his eyes looked 30. The park had become his home, Central Park, tucked between the bushes behind a statue of a forgotten hero. Every morning at sunrise, he'd fold his blanket, brush off his jeans, and head to the nearby cafe restroom to wash his face. He never begged. He never asked for help. But he never missed a day sitting under that maple tree with a book in his lap. People ignored him. Some frowned, some whispered, others took photos. But he just stayed quiet, watching life pass him by. Just 4 blocks away, in a towering glass building, lived Victoria Green, CEO of Greenline Holdings. The kind of woman who wore designer heels and never looked down, figuratively or literally. She didn't smile. She didn't pause. Her time was money, and money was everything. That cold Tuesday morning, her driver's car broke down near the park. Victoria decided to walk the rest of the way to her penthouse. But something, or someone, made her stop. She saw him, the boy, curled up in a sleeping bag, reading a water-stained copy of The Great Gatsby. He didn't flinch. He didn't notice her. He just turned the page slowly, mouthing the words like they mattered more than food. Something inside Victoria paused, froze. Her heels stopped clicking. She stood there for a moment, staring. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something. Who was this boy? Why was he here? So young, so quiet, so alone. And what would Victoria learn that would change her life forever? Sit back, because this story will stay in your heart long after the screen fades to black. Hat morning, Victoria stood still, longer than she had stood for anyone in years. She watched as the boy tucked his book into his bag like it was treasure. Then, slowly, he pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil. It was small, probably a leftover. And before he took a bite, he looked up toward the sky and whispered, "Thanks, Mom." Victoria's heart twitched. It wasn't the cold wind, it was something deeper. That name, that soft, aching voice. It hit her harder than she expected. She turned to leave. But something about the boy's eyes kept her frozen. She didn't know it yet, but this was the moment her life would start to unravel. Just as she stepped away, her phone buzzed. A reminder. Boardroom presentation, 8 a.m. sharp. She glanced at the boy again, shook her head as if to snap out of something, and hurried off. But her thoughts stayed behind with him. Noah. That name she didn't know yet. That face she couldn't unsee. The next day, she took the same path. Not because her driver's car was broken, it wasn't. Something inside her told her to walk. And when she reached the same spot near the statue, he was there. Again. Still. She paused across the sidewalk, half hiding behind her sunglasses, pretending to check her watch. He was scribbling in a tiny notebook now. His hands were red from the cold, but he didn't seem to notice. She took a few steps closer, this time slower, trying to understand. He looked up and locked eyes with her. Just for a second. No words, no fear. Just stillness. Victoria panicked and walked away fast. Her chest felt tight, her thoughts louder than her footsteps. That night she couldn't sleep. She tossed in her satin sheets while the boy curled up on a park bench in freezing air. She tried to push him from her mind, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw his. So the next morning, she came again, this time with purpose. She walked right up to him, cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said, in her usual clipped tone. He looked up, unsure if he should speak. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice steady but low. "Why are you out here?" she asked, arms crossed. It sounded colder than she meant. He blinked, then looked away. "I don't have anywhere else." That answer, it cut through her like a blade. She didn't respond. Just stood there, stunned. "Do you want money?" she asked next, pulling her wallet. Noah shook his head slowly. "No, I'm okay." Victoria froze. No one ever said no to her money. Ever. But this boy had just refused what most people would beg for. That was the moment. The moment something inside her cracked open. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper. Recognition. Guilt. And something she hadn't felt in years. Humanity. This wasn't just a homeless boy. This was the start of a truth she wasn't ready for. But soon, that truth would break her. She didn't come back the next morning, or the one after that. But by the third day, the guilt was unbearable. Victoria couldn't focus in meetings, couldn't laugh at her assistant's jokes, couldn't even sip her designer coffee without tasting bitterness. So that Friday morning, before the sun had fully broken through the clouds, she stepped out in boots too expensive for sidewalks and carried something in her hands, something she hadn't touched in years, a paper bag lunch, not just tossed together. She made it herself, a sandwich, a banana, a granola bar, and 2 bottles of water, one warm, one cold. When she reached the statue, Noah wasn't there yet. Her chest tightened. What if he was gone? What if something happened? But then she saw him, walking with a small limp, backpack strapped tight to his shoulders. Same hoodie, same worn shoes. He froze when he saw her standing there, like he wasn't sure if he was dreaming. She didn't speak, just held out the bag and said quietly, "It's warm." Noah blinked twice, then stepped forward. "For me?" She nodded once, awkwardly. "You should eat. It's cold." He took it gently, like it was made of gold. "Thank you, ma'am." "You don't have to call me that," she replied. "It's Victoria." Noah hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Thank you, Victoria." That smile, it wasn't wide, it wasn't bright, but it was real. It reached a place in her heart that hadn't been touched in years. From then on, it became a routine. She started showing up a few times a week, sometimes with food, sometimes with gloves. Once with a thick scarf she claimed she didn't need. Noah always accepted with quiet gratitude, but it wasn't about the things, it was the silence between them, the calm, the shared glances that slowly became conversation. One afternoon she found him sketching with a broken pencil on a napkin. "What's that?" she asked. He turned the napkin around. It was a drawing of the city skyline, with a tiny figure curled on a bench beneath a tree. She was speechless. "You drew this?" "Yeah," he said softly. "I like to remember what things look like before I forget them." That sentence hit her like a train. "You forget?" she asked. He nodded. "Been through some stuff. My memory's not perfect. I write down things. Draw. Just in case." Her throat tightened. "You don't have anyone?" Noah shook his head. "Used to. Not anymore." They sat in silence after that, side by side on the edge of the fountain. 2 people from different worlds. One in a pressed wool coat, the other in threadbare jeans. But in that moment, they weren't a millionaire and a homeless boy. They were just human. Victoria started telling him little things. How she hated networking, events. How boardrooms made her feel small inside. How she missed her brother, who died young, and her mother, who used to hum when she cooked. Noah listened like no one ever had, like her words were fragile and mattered. And when he spoke, it wasn't just about pain. He talked about stars, about music, about how silence in the city sounded like a lullaby if you listened right. She laughed once, really laughed. He smiled wider than ever before, and she noticed that he always sat with his hands curled in his lap, like he was trying to hold something that kept slipping through. "Do you draw every day?" she asked him once. He nodded. "It helps me stay here, like in the now. Otherwise, I get lost." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You're not lost, Noah." He looked at her and whispered, "Maybe not anymore." That was the moment. She knew. This wasn't charity. This wasn't guilt. This was connection. And deep down, she was beginning to realize something dangerous. She needed him, just as much as he had once needed her. One rainy evening, Victoria arrived at the park later than usual. Her heels clicked across the soaked pavement as she clutched her umbrella tightly. She was soaked halfway up her coat from a last-minute boardroom meeting that went long, but her eyes were only scanning for one thing: Noah. He wasn't on the bench, not at the fountain, not sketching by the statue. Panic crept in, silent and fast. She circled the park twice, heart pounding harder. With every lap, she even called his name once, just loud enough to feel foolish when the wind answered back. Then she saw it. Near the edge of the trees, where the grass turned muddy and uneven, something white was sticking out from behind a trash bin. She rushed forward, heels be damned, and found one of Noah's drawings half soaked in rain. It was a sketch of a woman standing under an umbrella, and a boy sitting under a tree beside her. She pressed the paper to her chest and whispered, "Where are you?" Just then, a voice behind her said, "I didn't think you'd come today." She turned so fast she nearly slipped. There he was, Noah, drenched, pale, but with that same soft smile. "I thought maybe you were done with me," he said. She marched toward him, furious and shaken. "You scared me. I didn't mean to." Then finally, she exploded. "Noah, who are you?" His smile faded. He looked down, then back up. "You don't want to know." "I do," she said firmly. "I've trusted you. I've shared things I don't share with anyone, but I don't even know your last name." He looked away for a long time. When he finally spoke, it was quiet. "Noah Carter. My name's Noah Carter." The name buzzed in her head like electricity. She'd heard that name before. Then it hit her. Hard. She'd seen it in the news, a year ago. A viral article she barely read. Her voice cracked. "Noah Carter, the missing boy from Vermont?" He flinched. "You disappeared after your parents' accident. They said you ran away from foster care. He interrupted her. "I didn't run. I walked. And I never went back." Victoria's heart thudded. She stepped closer. "Why?" Noah's voice was bitter now. "Because the people, they put me with, they didn't care. Not really. I wasn't a kid to them. I was a problem to manage." He continued, rain soaking his hoodie. "They locked my sketchbook in a drawer, said I was wasting time. They slapped me once for humming too loud. And when I told the caseworker, they said I was being dramatic. So I left. I chose the streets." Victoria was speechless. "I've been drawing to remember my parents, my life, to keep their faces from fading." He pulled out a folded napkin sketch from his pocket and held it up. "This is the only one I still have of my mom's smile. I keep redrawing it every week." Tears slipped down Victoria's cheeks. She didn't notice the rain anymore. "You could have told me," she whispered. "I didn't think you'd believe." "Me," he said. "Rich people. They see what they want." She shook her head slowly. "Not me. not anymore. And then he asked the one question she never expected. Victoria, will you help me find my real home again? It was in that moment, the twist she never saw coming, that the boy she thought was just a quiet, homeless teen was a lost child from a shattered family, braver than anyone she'd ever met. And she realized she hadn't saved him. He'd saved her. Victoria didn't answer right away. She couldn't. Her throat was tight. Her hands trembled as she looked at Noah, really looked at him, not as a homeless boy she pitied, not as someone she helped during her morning walks, but as someone who mattered, and something shifted. Not in the sky, not in the trees around them, but inside her. For the first time in years, she felt like someone else's life depended on her making the right choice. Not with money, not with a donation, but with her heart. She knelt down on the wet grass and took Noah's cold hand. "I'm not going to let this go," she whispered. "I promise you that." He didn't smile. He just nodded, and that was enough. That night, Victoria did something she hadn't done in decades. She canceled her dinner meeting. She skipped the gala she was supposed to host. She brought Noah to her apartment. It was warm, bright, filled with high-end furniture and polished floors. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the way Noah looked at the bookshelf, the paintings, the grand piano in the corner. "This place is too shiny for me," he said softly. She chuckled. "Then let's make it messy together." She gave him clean clothes, warm food, and, most importantly, space. Not the kind with walls, but emotional space. Trust. Over the next few days, she didn't force conversation. She let him speak when he was ready, and each time he opened up, she listened like his words were diamonds. She found an old police contact and asked for help reopening the missing child case. She called every shelter, every caseworker, every official who ever touched Noah's file. And when she faced walls, and she did, she knocked harder. One night, as Noah sketched quietly by her window, she came over and sat beside him. "You told me your mom used to hum a lullaby when she cooked," she said. "Was it this one?" She hummed softly, off-key, unsure. But his eyes welled up instantly. "That's it," he whispered. "That's exactly it." And in that moment, something broke in him. But not in a bad way. He let it all out, grief, fear, memories too heavy for a child to carry, and she held him. The next morning, Victoria made the biggest decision of her life. She contacted a private investigator, one of the best. She didn't just want Noah to be safe. She wanted his truth known. And when the investigator found what he needed, a surviving aunt in Ohio who'd searched for him for years, Victoria didn't cry. Noah did. They sat together on the couch, holding the phone between them as his aunt sobbed on the other end. "Noah," she said through her tears, "you're not alone anymore, baby. You never were." But the redemption didn't stop there. Victoria took her morning walks back through the park, but not alone. She and Noah started a small foundation, Art from the Sidewalk. They collected drawings from street youth, held gallery shows, sold sketches, and used the funds to give those kids real chances. Victoria wasn't cold anymore. She didn't ignore the hurt in the world. She stared it in the face and said, "Not on my watch." And Noah, he got his home. He got his family back. But more than that, he found a voice, one that didn't whisper apologies in the dark, but shouted color and hope from every canvas he touched. They both had been broken in quiet ways, but together, they became whole. Spring came early that year. The trees around Central Park bloomed with a quiet gentleness, as if the world itself had softened just enough for hope to take root again. Noah stood on the freshly cut grass, no longer in tattered clothes or hiding under his hoodie. He wore a simple blue shirt and clean jeans. In his hands, he held a sketchbook. its pages filled with the journey he'd never spoken aloud, but finally learned to draw. Beside him, Victoria smiled. Not the polite, rehearsed smile the world had once known, but something warmer, freer. Her hair danced with the breeze as she watched Noah draw a little boy playing with his dog across the lawn. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't need to. They had learned that silence, when shared by people who've survived storms, could speak louder than words ever could. It had been 6 months since that night on the balcony, since the truth poured out of both of them like open wounds finally allowed to breathe. Victoria had stepped away from her business temporarily. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest, to feel something other than deadlines and performance charts. Noah started therapy, slowly untangling the knots of trauma he carried like bricks in his chest. And for the first time in his life, he had a room of his own. A real room. Not a park bench. Not a shelter bunk. A space where he could fall asleep without fear of being moved or mocked. His walls were plastered with art he created at the local center Victoria helped fund. The Haven Project, they named it. It wasn't just for him. It was for every kid who had ever been told they weren't worth saving. Now they had a place to paint, sketch, write, and heal. One morning, Noah left a note on Victoria's kitchen counter. Gone to the center early. Got asked to teach the younger kids today. Can you believe that? She laughed when she saw it. Not because it was funny, but because the miracle was real. The boy who once curled into a park bench, broken and silent, was now guiding others out of that same darkness. Not as a project, not as a rescue case, but as a leader, a survivor. A young man who now believed his story had power. Later that evening, they sat on her rooftop, watching the lights flicker below. Victoria turned to him, wine glass in hand again, but this time it wasn't about pain. It was about celebration. You know, she said gently, when I first met you, I thought I was helping you. I didn't realize you were saving me too. Noah didn't answer with words. He just reached over and held her hand. Firm, honest, grateful. In that quiet grip, they both knew this wasn't the end of something broken. It was the beginning of something whole, a new chapter neither of them had dared to hope for. A boy with no bed who now had a purpose, a woman with no peace who now had a family. They didn't need the world to understand. They had each other, and that was finally enough. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?